All right, everybody, we got ourselves a Sunday conversation coming up with Khari Thompson of Boston.com. It has been one hell of a week for the Boston Celtics, and we got the full recap for you. This is Green with Envy. You know the deal. Let's lock in. What up, what up, what up? Welcome into another edition of Green with Envy. As always, this is your boy Will Weir checking in. How you doing? How you living? Today, we don't got a three-man weave for you, but that's okay. When we need to fill a role, we got some great guys that we can call in, and there's none better than our guy at Boston.com. Proud to have Khari Thompson joining us today. What up, Khari? How you doing today, man?
Happy Sunday. Happy Sunday. Hello to the audience. How you guys doing, man?
Let's go. We're great, man. I love having you on, man. It's so nice having here. I know you and Greg go way back with him being a basketball coach for you back in the day. The jump rope king, which if those of you at Boston.com don't know, make sure you ask Khari about the jump rope king story. That's something everybody got to be informed about. But, man, I love getting a chance to have you on here. I know you and I were chopping it up a little bit before we got going. But right now you're doing a little bit of Patriots coverage, a little bit of Celtics coverage. What has kind of the Celtics coverage you've been doing this year entailed?
So I've been at all the home games, just doing notebooks off of the pregame access and doing some secondary next day analysis, breaking down the games. But just trying to learn and help out some of the best Celtics guys in the business, Adam Himmelsbach and Gary Washburn over at the Globe.
Has there been I feel like on there's a million players podcast now, but I feel like every time a player's on, they always have did you have a welcome to the NBA moment? Did you have a moment now that you're back in Boston, you're at every home game for, do you have a moment where it's like, I don't know, you just had like a moment of realization, like, damn, I'm covering the Boston Celtics right now?
So during the Heat series last year in the playoffs, I was the one who asked Jimmy Butler if Grant was the answer. And then, I don't know if you remember the clip, but it's the clip when Jimmy's like, "Hell no, Grant Williams is not the answer." And I saw it, and I was like, "Yo, I'm really on NBA TV right now with this question, yo," because I asked it pretty aggressively because I knew Jimmy wanted to talk about it because like he was like beating his chest for the game, like, "Yeah, you can't guard me," da, 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 da. And like get to the post game presser, and I'm like, "So Jimmy, Grant wasn't the answer now, was he?" And Jimmy was like, "Hell no." Nah. And like I started laughing because it was funny, and like I kind of like cut him off as he was like giving his answer. So I kind of messed up the soundbite, but like good moment, man. I enjoyed it.
No, that's perfect, man. That's literally putting, fuel to the flame right there. You knew exactly what you had going in, and you knew he was going to give you something good. And it's funny, I was just with a friend the other day, and she went up to go see. She had a friend visiting her who's a big Luka fan. So, living in Austin, Texas, they drove up to Dallas for the night to watch Heat Mavericks. And she obviously knows like that I cover the Celtics, all this. So I saw her yesterday, and she was like, "So I went to that game, and I kind of noticed." Is Jimmy Butler kind of a bully? I was like, yeah, that's his thing. That's what he does. He wants to be that dude. And so I know when you can kind of give him that energy, he was ready. He was probably pumped that you asked the question the way you did. And I'm glad it ended up on NBA TV.
Yeah. It was awesome, man. I loved it.
All right, man. Well, let's get into this season, man. I want to talk. We're gonna kind of hit the full scope of where the Celtics are at. But let's just look at this week for a minute, because this is kind of a wild week in Celtics basketball when you look at the full scope of it. So when you go back to last Sunday, and I'll kind of run it all down here for us, but you go back to last Sunday, right? They play the Warriors at home, just eviscerate them by 50 plus points. Not exactly, full on revenge for the NBA Finals, but over the last year and a half, every time the Celtics team feels like, man, this is different, the Warriors have kind of been there to say, I'm not so sure, right? And put them in their place, so to speak. So for the Celtics to come out and do what they did, like, it was extremely meaningful. It was more than a regular season game. You fast forward to Tuesday night against the Cavs. They're not playing great, yet they have a 20-point lead going into the fourth quarter. And you're like, all right, now everyone's starting to look ahead. Evan Mobley goes out, I think about halfway through the third quarter. You're like, all right, everyone is starting to look ahead. Celtics Nuggets, this is the showdown. Cavs caught him slipping. The Dean Wade game happens in the fourth quarter. Celtics don't execute late. That narrative starts to parlay itself ahead of Thursday night. Celtics lose that close one to the Cavs. And then, of course, that would bring us into that Thursday night massive potential NBA Finals preview against the Nuggets. And honestly, well-played game, a game that was executed at a very high level. And ultimately, it was a game the Celtics lost. Tatum played below average. I don't even want to say necessarily played below average. And Nikola Jokic there's no answer for that, dude. There's literally nothing you can do. And ultimately, was the difference in that game. And then, of course, you get last night in Phoenix, where Celtics are on the brink of, in air quotes, for those of you listening on the audio, slide. Where they could have had their first 3-game losing streak. KD goes scorched earth for 45 points, but Celtics respond. Celtics hold on late. They execute in a much better fashion. So really a week of Celtics basketball that gave you a little bit of everything. Khari, you've been around this team. What was your biggest takeaway from this week as we start to get into the last under 20 games of the season now?
Well, I think the takeaway is that they're not perfect and they've got some things to iron out, particularly in late games. I will say you've had some encouraging things during this stretch. Like, as bad as the 2 losses were, that was the first time they'd lost back-to-back since like November. Like, this team just does not lose back-to-back games. So I think you can be encouraged by that. Obviously, I was there when they played the Warriors, and that game was just over. Like, you could just tell the Warriors kind of packed it up by halftime. Like, like Celtics were up like 45 at the half. And it just shows how they can just destroy teams, especially when you have Jaylen being able to penetrate like the way that he did, you know what I mean? And being able to just kick it out and hit all those shooters. So encouraging that they were able to stop the slide, at Phoenix. And it was definitely an interesting week for sure.
Yeah, I mean, you talk about Jaylen, and Jaylen was spectacular in that Denver game. Minus the free throws, which I know we'll touch on here in a minute. But post All-Star break, Jaylen has just been on another level. He's averaging 28 points since the break. He's shooting just under 55% from the field, over 42% from three, 6 rebounds per game, 3.5 assists, only 1.5 turnover. Like, we've been talking a lot on this show that this feels like this has been Jaylen Brown's best year overall. And I think right now, when you try to break down this season for Jaylen Brown, since the All-Star break, 8 games, like, this is the best stretch that we've seen of Jaylen. And it's from, you touched on it, it's not just him scoring the basketball, it's his decision making and a little bit of, and I hate to, and feel free to jump in here and correct what I'm saying here, because you've been closer to the team, but almost the attitude that he's brought. Because you look at that Nuggets game, and there were certain parts where he was like, I don't give a damn if Aaron Gordon's in front of me. I'm getting a bucket right now, and I'm going through you. And so he has this certain mentality that I think a lot of Celtics fans sometimes see in him, and they wish there was probably sometimes a little bit more in Tatum. Sometimes it might get the best of him, but right now, I think what we're seeing is the best balance of kind of that dog, that aggressiveness, with also now Jaylen Brown being able to make better decisions on a consistent basis. Are you seeing something similar?
Yeah, I like what you touched on with his mentality. I'll hit that in 2 pieces. The first one is, these days he's talking about how it's his responsibility to get to the rack. He's like, we have enough 3-point shooting. Like, I mean, everybody in the roster can shoot. You got Tatum, Porzingis, like Al's shooting. Drew is absolutely deadly from the corner. So Jaylen is like, we need someone who's going to slash and be aggressive and get to the rim and open things up for people. And I think that's the right call. That's what this team needs, because what's frustrating, as you well know, is that this team lives and dies by the 3. And more than anyone else in the NBA, really. I mean, that's just Mazzulla ball.
Mm-hmm.
So it's refreshing to see Jaylen attack the boards the way that he's attacking, posting up the way he's posting up. Like, that's really nice. And the other piece is, he said before the season that his goal was to make all defensive first team.
Right.
And whether that is gonna come to fruition is neither here nor there. But to hear a star kind of attack with that defensive intensity, like I want to be the best player on the defensive end of the floor, is encouraging, because you need your stars to lock in and play good defense to win. And that's been key for this season.
Yeah, and your point of him wanting to make all NBA, like, you're right. I don't know if it's going to happen or not. It's only 10 spots, which is tough across the entire NBA when you have 10 spots for, all NBA defense, and you've got, feels like Derek White's probably a lock for one of those spots. Drew Holiday is going to be in contention. But if you're Jaylen Brown, he's put together some pretty nice highlight reels this week. When you think about, he picked up Steph Curry full court. He caused, when do you see Steph Curry get a backcourt violation? And I've talked about it multiple times. He actually went backcourt twice in that sequence. They only called it once. And, and then he has the moment that almost saved the game in Denver was him picking Jamal Murray's pocket, out by the midcourt line as well. Getting that play in transition led to the Tatum open three, which unfortunately, didn't go in. But, Jaylen's putting his money, he's got a lot of money these days, putting his money where his mouth is, in the fact that he wants to buy in on that defensive end, and you're really seeing that come through. And so for me, when I look at this week, and if you extend it out to, a little bit beyond this week, Jaylen Brown and the way that he's playing for me is a massive positive. Now, I have to mention the free throws. It's concerning, like 7 of 14 wasn't good. 4 of 7 last night in Phoenix. That's 11 of 21, in the last 2 games. How much of a concern is that?
That's a big number.
Say it again, Khari.
I was saying those are big men numbers.
Exactly, right? Dude, honestly, I thought about that last night watching the Phoenix game when I was doing the math. I was like, man, Shaq would get to the line 21 times in a game, but those are Shaq numbers, right? That's what you're talking about. And I just told you how great he's been shooting from the field in the 3-point line, after the All-Star break. And, this is something Greg and I constantly go back on, is you can kind of see it. Just the confidence isn't there when he gets to the line, but yet he's one of the most confident guys in the league. Everywhere else, I don't know. I have no explanation for it. I don't know if there's anything that you've been able to piece together being around the team of what you think, might be the reason behind those free throw struggles.
No, I have no explanation for it, dude. He's an NBA player. I'm sure he practices it. You got to be able to hit those, man. They're called free throws for a reason. But we can be encouraged by the rest of his game. And I always go back to what Shaq used to say about that. Shaq is like, like, can't be perfect, like, there had to be some point of my game that is lacking. And Jaylen does have his fitness beyond that, but overall putting together a really nice year.
Yeah, Jaylen's been awesome. And looking back at this week, like I said, we got kind of a little bit of everything. Let's go to Jayson Tatum for a minute and talk about him, because I think last night in Phoenix, he had, a bit of an up and down game overall, but really ended the game strong in that fourth quarter. Was a big part of the reason that the Celtics were able to put some distance between them and the Suns late in that game and pull away, despite Kevin Durant just going, like I said, scorched earth earlier with 45 points. I think he was 18 of 26. Another one of those Jokic type performance where it's like, all right, this guy's so good, we're not going to be able to stop him tonight. And this just happens. That just happens, with those guys. But with Jayson Tatum, of course, everyone has been looking at some of the late game struggles. You saw it in Cleveland. You saw it again throughout the Denver game and then late. What has been your take on Tatum late in games? Are you worried, or are you confident based on his past results in which we have seen him be able to rise to the occasion?
I think you got to be a little bit worried, because make or miss league, and you get paid the big bucks to make the big shots. And I think we've seen repeatedly at this point that throwing the ball out to Tatum and expecting him to go win the game like he's Kobe is not it for the Celtics. It's not going to get it done, which is why I like what they've done with the team this year, because they have so many options now. Like, everybody on the court should be able to hit you a game winner. And that's, I think that's something that Brad and them recognize. Like, yo, we need to diversify our offensive options at the late of the game. We need to be able to throw it into a big like Porzingis at the top of the free throw line and let him hit a little fadeaway jumper or create that way. We need another shooter like Drew Holiday, that can help space things even more. So, as far as Tatum goes, he's had some big performances in the playoffs for sure. I mean, who can forget Game 7 in Philly last year? Who can forget the way he closed out the Bucks 2 years ago to get them to the finals? But like, none of them have proven that they can do it in the playoffs on a consistent basis the way they need to.
Yeah. I mean, I think for me, the biggest thing for this team when it gets to playoff time, the game against the Cavs that happened earlier this week, that's the game they cannot afford in the postseason. That too many times they've had games where they should have closed out a team and it went 6 games or 7 games instead. And then you're building up, things that are going to hurt you in the immediate sense, but hurt you in the long run when you're trying to make a run through. I mean, it's going to be a dogfight. Like, I know that they have a big lead in the Eastern Conference, but whoever that 8 seed is that they're going to end up playing, Magic have given them trouble in the past. Feels like they're going to be okay because that's a young team, but they've given them trouble. The Pacers step up and always play the Celtics tough. We know the issues, with the Heat. The Sixers might fall to the 8 seed, and maybe they get Joel Embiid back at that time. So there's not going to be an easy path for this team to get back. And so I think closing games is going to be imperative. And, going back to Tatum, talking about, and you said this great here, and this is what I was thinking about last night, which was the big difference for me between the Phoenix game and not necessarily the Denver game, but other close games, like especially let's go use the Cleveland game as well, is, when they just try to go ISO, and JJ Redick had some good stats on this, because you try to look at the Celtics clutch time stats and figure out where is this team missing it, and all their stats are pretty good in the clutch. Like, they're in the top, 4 to 7 basically of almost every clutch stat that you can find. So it's really hard, but when they do go ISO, which you pointed out, that's where they do tend to falter. And they do that quite a bit, and they're 4th in frequency, 27 in points per possession. And this is something that I don't know if you listen to the Dunker Spot podcast with Steve Jones and Nekias Duncan, but we had Steve Jones on here a couple weeks ago, and he said something that jumped out to me last night watching the Phoenix game, is that when the Celtics go ISO, what they're doing is they're almost giving other teams a way out. Because as much as like it might work out sometimes if they go ISO, but what makes this team so exceptional is the weight of the talent that they have. And so when they're in constant motion, when they're in constant movement, anybody can win you a game. And, last night we saw one of the biggest plays was Tatum actually hitting Drew Holiday with a little slip pass. He was in the middle of the lane, kicked it out to Al Horford, who, he's in there for Porzingis. Porzingis doesn't play last night. Horford struggled from 3, hits the game-sealing 3 to put them up, and the Suns never really could get back in the game. And so when the Celtics go ISO, they're almost giving the team, the defense, an out. Whereas when they run multiple actions, they run whether it's White and Tatum, it's whatever it might be, have some off-ball action. The weight of the talent disparity that the Celtics have, that's their biggest advantage versus anybody they play. And that includes teams like Denver, because everyone on the Celtics team can play offense and defense. And so when they let teams off the hook, that's when they get in trouble. But when they bring the full weight of their talent, like you said, anybody on this team can win them a game. And Drew Holiday almost did it in Denver, right? He almost had that against Jokic when they had to go to that matchup. So I think you're right. It really comes down to how do you get everyone involved so that nobody on the defense can rest, and that they have to constantly be aware of where everyone is at all times.
Exactly. That's you nailed it, and that's the starting 5. That's just what it is. That's the way the team is constructed. But it can be easy to fall into bad habits, especially when you have a player as well regarded as Tatum, because like someone in that role who's top 5 MVP candidate, like, the fans are going to be like, why is Tatum not taking the last shot every time? But like, that's when they're at their best, because like, you just got to open things up for everybody.
Yeah, absolutely. And so that's where I think this team has its biggest advantage. So let me ask you, Khari, as you watch this team night to night, and you're getting to see them, up close and personal, what do you think is their biggest advantage here as we look at comparing them to the rest of the East and then really to the NBA? Because this is a team that expectation at a minimum is getting to the NBA Finals. So when you compare them to the rest of the league, what is the biggest advantage that you think they need to lean on down the stretch and into the playoffs?
Well, I think they just need to be who they are. Like, I think that Mazzulla ball generally works. It's just like, I don't know, for whatever reason, they just didn't come to play against the Heat in the early series. But like that, this team seems to have like more of a business-like approach this year. Like they seem way more serious and locked in and engaged. And I think, the record speaks for itself in that regard. But like you've got not only one of the most efficient offenses in the NBA, you've got one of the most efficient defenses. And you've got like 5 dudes you could legitimately make an all-star case for. So it's like you said, it's leaning into that. And the weight of the talent is a good point, because like what they really need to do is stay healthy and just not do dumb stuff. Like they've got it set up like where they literally have everything.
Yeah.
So as far as their biggest advantage, I mean, it's the roster construction. That starting 5 is lethal, and you've got Horford coming off the bench, doing what he does, bringing energy, hitting big shots. Peyton Pritchard's been playing well. Sam Hauser's been hitting some big shots. Like they just need to do what they've been doing, and that's why I brought up the not losing back-to-back stats, because like if they can keep that up in the playoffs and just be consistent, like basically what I'm trying to say is they should win. They should win. They got all the pieces. They got all the like
it's all there.
Too much talent.
Yeah, it's one of those seasons where like we grew up, we're Boston raised, right? Like we still have the DNA of, I know people on the outside look at it as like, man, you guys grew up in Boston. Like you guys you're used to winning everything. It's like, man, we grew up with some DNA of things are going to go wrong. We're just waiting for stuff to go wrong. That's still in the DNA of a lot of, Boston sports fans. But with this team, it really is all lined up that it should be right there. And one of the X factors is going to be Joe Mazzulla. So I'm a little curious to get your take on, this is year 2, Joe Mazzulla. What has been your thought of, or what have you seen from him as a head coach?
I think Joe is looking a lot more comfortable and confident in himself, taking himself a lot less seriously and being a lot less wound up that he was in the past. And that's good, because like he got thrust into a really tough situation last year, taking over for Ime and taking over a team with title expectations. And you had people calling for him to be fired before his first season was even over. So, Joe seems like he's more sure of himself this year. And that's a really good thing. I think the team's been playing really well. Does he still have some habits that will that will frustrate people? Yeah. I mean, like, but it just kind of is what it is with Joe. I don't know. I hear a lot of people saying that Joe is the team's weak link, but I would disagree with that. I think overall he's done a really good job. I think that just like some of the situational stuff, some of that's on the players to figure out, like like
No,
if you're at that level and you've got that much talent, nobody knows like their strengths and weaknesses quite like the players. So like y'all should know the stuff about the ISO. You know what I mean?
Right.
Like y'all should, like
Joe can't physically be
it's
out
that
there.
sort of thing.
And that's one of like the misconceptions for, like an NBA head coach versus, even like an NFL coach, right? Like Mazzulla may call some plays, but it's not the same as football, where there's a new play call coming in, and if you have a Tom Brady, a Peyton Manning, they can audible. They'll make their own adjustments, but most times you have like the coaches are very play to play involved in NFL game. NBA, you have more concepts that are kind of built out, and then on the fly, there may be, especially, out of a sideline out of bounds play, there's a few different scenarios where it's like, there's absolutely a specific play, by the coach being called. But to your point, a lot of that comes on to the players, and they have to be the ones to adjust. And Joe's talked about that, and that's why, he talked about, I think Jared Weiss had an article in The Athletic that we talked about a few weeks ago when he went to go visit Manchester City's coach, and talked about why, like, like the soccer philosophy behind it, right? Like soccer, you don't call a timeout, you just kind of figure it out on the fly, and that's what he's trying to install in these players. And I think you're spot on that. To me, I don't view Joe Mazzulla as a weak link. I think, yeah, if you compare him to Eric Spoelstra is the best coach in the game. Of course, that's an advantage to the Heat in Eric Spoelstra. But I think year one Mazzulla to year two Mazzulla is miles of difference. And I'm just as guilty as anybody else for getting lost in the sauce in the middle of the postseason run and being like, getting frustrated with Joe Mazzulla. But I think once I had a week or two, really sit back and look at what Mazzulla had to do last year, it was incredibly unfair situation that he was in throughout the season. And then for the scrutiny that he got, and I came to a realization where I was like, okay, I got to give this man a clean slate going into this year, because that would have been difficult for anyone to handle. Never mind a guy who, let's be real, Khari, he could be the third window on this show. He's our age, right? He's 34, 35 years old. Like, I know you're a little bit younger, but he's the same age as I am right now. This dude could be on this podcast more realistically than he should be head coaching the Boston Celtics.
Sure. And that's why they beefed up his staff. Like, that's why you bring in Sam Cassell. That's why you bring in Jeff Van Gundy as a consultant. You know what I mean? Like, there's some serious experience on this staff. And that's why when you say the coaching is a weak link, better be careful what you're talking about, because you're talking about more than just Joe.
Right. Right.
Joel ultimately has the say as a head coach, but like, there are some dudes who have won on that staff. That I think they've done a nice job of supporting Joe with. And like, I don't know, like, I think just having an off season helps, man. Like,
it had to. Like, it was, I thought back to a prediction I made at the beginning of last season where, like, because everything happened the night before training camp. So I think within the next week or two, here on the show, me, Greg, and Adam were making our, preseason predictions. And I had it all penciled in my head. I was like, all right, this is going to be Celtics Nuggets. This is what I think. This team's going to take the next step. But then as I thought about it, I was like, listen, last year, Gallo got hurt. Rob Williams had surgery right before the start of the season. Ime gets flipped out for Joe. And I was like, at a certain point, losing your head coach the night of training camp has to matter. And I said that then. Then they got off to a red hot start, and it all left my mind. I completely forgot about it for 6 months until they got eliminated. And I was like, you know what? That was actually probably right, that at some point that was going to catch up. And that was even before knowing Damon Stoudemire was going to leave to go to Georgia Tech. So there was no way that him having a full offseason wasn't going to make a big difference. And I've honestly, I don't know if he's going to be a coach of the year candidate, but I think he's in that realm. And I think I think Joe Mazzulla has been pretty impressive, even if I have times where I might say, I wish he did this or that. I'm confident that I'm confident in Joe going forward. For me, I do not see him as a weak link going into the playoffs for this team.
Yeah. Like, ultimately, if their battleship gets sunk, I'm putting it on the Jays. That's who I'm putting it on.
I mean,
y'all have been together like 7 years, man. Y'all know each other inside and out. Y'all have the talent. Y'all have every single piece. Like, at some point, they got to turn in some big sign performances, man. Like, as much as we just praised Jaylen, Game 7 last year at the Garden after the D White tip in should have been the Jaylen game. Well, we got 8 turnovers.
I said this earlier in the week. The Denver game where JT didn't have it. JT didn't have it on Thursday in Denver. The Jaylen Brown game we got Thursday in Denver, even in a loss, that's the Jaylen Brown that everybody was hoping to see in Game 7 as soon as Tatum rolled his ankle in the first play of the game.
Yeah, exactly. So that's why it's encouraging the way he's playing now, because if he can do that in the playoffs, like, whole different team.
Yeah, and we're both saying here that it's there for this team, right? Like, NBA Finals at a minimum, and to me, other than them playing the Nuggets, I think they got to win the championship. Like, the Nuggets, it's gonna be. I'm gonna try to make a case that I think the Celtics can beat the Nuggets, but I think that's gonna be a really, really tough matchup. I don't think they're overmatched, but I think it's a very equal matchup, and ultimately, them having Nikola Jokic might just be the differentiator in that type of matchup. But as we look at the East right now, and like I said, I don't want to overlook the East because I think there's a lot of good teams in the East, despite the Celtics having a large lead. And there's some teams that are injured that will get guys back, presumably by the playoffs. If there is a team in the East that you think could be a trouble spot for the Celtics, have you narrowed in on which team or teams you think that might be?
Well, you always got to be worried about Milwaukee. I mean, you got Giannis, you got a chance. I mean,
Right.
and Dame. I mean, they did hit a rough patch where they lost a bunch of games, but I think that's going to happen when you have a coaching transition. First of all, they didn't even give Adrian Griffin a year. That was wild. Then you bring in Doc Rivers. We'll see. I mean, it's interesting choice bringing in Doc Rivers, probably to win a Game 7, most likely in Boston. And knowing his history with Game 7s, interesting choice.
Yeah.
But you got, I mean, Giannis and Dame alone should be enough to make you scared in a series enough that they can get beat. Also, the Heat culture. I know they're not going to be the highest seed, but
didn't stop them last year.
You gotta fear the what is it, the dirtiest, nastiest, most mean team in the NBA. What's that they have,
the paragraph that they have written on their court for describing Heat culture, which is just ridiculous. But I'm with you on Miami. I'll be honest, when it comes to Milwaukee, a little bit of what I just said about Joe Mazzulla last year, where it's like, man, you lose your coach the night before training camp. That has to matter. When you fire your head coach in his first year, and they lost Terry Stotts, who was Dame's old coach in Portland.
Yeah.
Adrian Griffin fired him before the beginning of the season. Like, I feel like that's going to have to matter at some point for this Bucks team. I'm with you. You can't ever write off Giannis. That's the biggest thing. Dame in a late game, even though he's been a little bit up and down this year, late game, his numbers are still very good. The biggest thing for me with Milwaukee is I don't really know what Chris Middleton is right now. And that's where there's just a big gap for me, is when you have Giannis, you have Dame. Okay. Even if I think Dame might be, if we're just ranking the players in that series, even if I put Dame fourth, if you go late game, he might be first. You know what I mean? But even if for, 42 minutes of that game, he's fourth, that's still, between the Jays and Giannis and Dame. All right, you're right there. Then if you're going down to, and I'd say Brook Lopez at this point is probably your third best player on Milwaukee, because I just don't know night to night what you're getting with Middleton. And Lopez is fine, but he's more in the Al Horford category, who we got three or four more names. We got three more names on the Celtics before we get to Al Horford. And so for me, that's where the disparity in the Bucks is, I think, a little bit will be too great for them if the Celtics are healthy, is that if they don't have Middleton playing at a level that puts him somewhere on par with Porzingis, or, I used to think there was a debate between Middleton and Jaylen Brown, but over the last 2 years, it's clearly Jaylen Brown. And so it's tough for me to look at Milwaukee, but I'm with you. I think Giannis is just that. Giannis is that type of dude that you can't count him out in a series.
And we have to mention Drew, obviously, switching sides, because they had Drew Holiday, and now
exactly.
Drew Holiday.
Yeah, and so if you're ever gonna, that's the thing, right? If you're ever gonna guard Dame with somebody, and you got Derek White and Drew Holiday, like, that's a pretty good combo to go at him late. But talking about the Heat, man, once again, it feels like, even though I know they've lost a couple games this week, they are playing better basketball. So in the bottom of the East is so tight. Who knows where they're going to fall? Probably somewhere between 4 and 8 is what it looks like right now, is probably where they're going to be. But that is still a team that is always just lurking. And, Nikola Jovic has been starting to turn up a little bit. Jaime Jaquez, I'm a huge fan of him as a rookie. Like, once again, they're finding guys to fill those gaps. Out goes Max Strus, out goes Gabe Vincent, in comes these two. Does Caleb Martin all of a sudden turn into an NBA All-Star like he was again last year? Duncan Robinson has refound his mojo. So I'm with you. I'm starting to lean into, I think the Heat might be the number one team that I'm looking at in the East. Because if the Knicks get healthy, they're interesting as well, but they got a ton of injuries that they got to get sorted out first. But I think the Heat are a team I'm leaning into, that if the Celtics, find themselves in a tough matchup, they're the team that I'm looking at that maybe, just maybe, they have a chance to pull off an upset. But that's where I think KP, if Kristaps Porzingis is healthy, he might ultimately be the difference maker. What's been your impression getting to watch him for this first season up close?
So I was down in Miami for the last time they played the Heat, and so they didn't have an answer for Kristaps. Granted, he did end up leaving the game after he got cheap shotted.
Scared the shit. That that scared the shit out of me. That I thought was our season right there. Luckily, he was out for like a game or two, but I thought that was the season right there.
And that's like the Heat get away with stuff like that. Like that's just like that's who they like. They're the team that'll yank the shorts and give a little elbow and stuff like they're always starting stuff, man. Like and the Celtics do not respond well to that sort of thing when they play them. Like it's just they're one of those teams that'll do anything to get a little mental advantage, and I think that is what makes their culture so impressive. Like that, like. I don't know, like they just about it, man. Like they just scrap and they fight, and even though they're not necessarily the most talented, like they scrap, they fight, and they hit big shots, and that's what you need in the playoffs. Like,
right,
this type of mentality you need.
Yeah, and when you got Eric Spoelstra, like we said, as much as I love Joe Mazzulla, Spoelstra is definitely one of the few coaches I look to where I'm like, that is an advantage having Eric Spoelstra in your back pocket. So we'll have to see, man. I'm really excited for this stretch run with the Celtics. Like you said, despite this week being a little bit up and down, I'm super confident in this team that I think if they remain healthy, this is the team to get it done. And if they get to the finals and they face the Nuggets, we'll have to see. That's a bit of a toss up. I think we'll have to just kind of wait and see. But but while I have you here, I want to do just a couple minutes here. I want to flip this to another Boston sports team that you cover here. I know you do a lot of coverage with the Patriots, and literally, I think about an hour and a half ago, before we started recording this, the Patriots finally ended the Mac Jones era. So let's talk a little bit of Patriots football here real quick. Mac Jones is finally out of New England. What does this mean for the rest of the offseason and specifically the quarterback position for the Patriots?
Well, I think it was to be expected with the way things went down with Mac last year. And I don't think it changes much. I think regardless of whether or not Mac was going to be on the roster, I think they were going to target a quarterback at number 3. I mean, you have to. This is the year where you make that swing. You've got the number 3 pick. Like, say you're marginally better this year, you have a worse pick next year, and you've got 3 guys at the top of the draft who people believe can be franchise caliber quarterbacks. Now, where it gets interesting is like, all right, if you stay at number 3, you're basically getting the third of the big 3 that nobody else wants. So like, do you stay there and take that? Do you try to trade it up and move up for a guy? But I'm curious for your take, Will. If they do take a quarterback at 3, do you play him or sit him?
I mean, here's the thing. I feel like there's not a clearly defined answer to this. Like, I think it's all contextually based on who they end up taking. And I don't know these guys well enough. Like, I'm not as versed. I don't really watch a ton of college football. I'll tune in here and there. I've seen a little bit of Caleb Williams, who's the least likely guy to end up in New England. I know it's either going to be most likely, if they stay with that pick, either Drake May or Jaden Daniels out of LSU. And like I said, it's contextual because I think it depends to me what they do. Do they fix the offensive line? Did they get better weapons? Because the weapons have been shitty the last couple of years. Like they just haven't been great, right? And so if the guys, if they're going to bring in a young quarterback and the offensive line is going in, it's likely to be a disaster, and there's not going to be a ton of weapons. I would say let's throw Bailey Zappi back out there. I don't know what the point is going to be. What are we going to learn about a young QB who doesn't have anything set up for success? So if you can make adjustments where you feel like we're going to have a solid offensive line, we're going to have, I saw there was a rumor about Calvin Ridley that I saw floating around the internet earlier today about maybe the Patriots making a push for Calvin Ridley. So if you're going to do that, then I think once again, it's going to depend on once they get these guys in camp and who they are. But I would feel better about, let's see what we got. Let's start to build this up. Let's learn by failure. Like, I think that's the best way to learn is by failing. And so I'm cool with it. But I think if you're going to put him into a situation where failing is basically the only option because of everything else around him, I don't think that's super helpful. But that's where I would kind of lean. Do you have a lean on which quarterback you prefer, or are you just kind of leaning on other draft experts and what they think might end up happening?
I'm in your boat. I haven't watched nearly enough college football to really make that call.
Yeah.
But I will say that you raised an interesting point as far as, what needs to be around these players, because that was part of the thing. Like Mac was getting killed last year, and that's like part of why he like had the yips, because like he did not have much time to do what he needed to do, and they haven't even re-signed Mike Onwenu yet. Like, that's your right tackle, and like Trent Brown, with the way he was talking at the end of the year, I don't know if he's going to be back either. So it's like, you've got some young guards, like you've got City So, who played pretty well at times last year, and you're working with Antonio Mafi. But you're right, the weapons need to be better, and I'm not sure if you're best served trying to throw a young quarterback into that situation right away. But yeah, they need to go get some receivers. They've needed to go get receivers for a couple years now. They did a nice job getting Pop Douglas in the draft last year, but like, Juju Smith-Schuster did not live up to his contract. They re-signed Devontae Parker, and like I'm like, oh, that's interesting. That's the guy who you've decided to pay. Like in terms of
what'd you think about that? Have you seen that Calvin Ridley rumor that was popping around earlier? Would that be someone that appeals to you?
Yeah, I mean, the question is, does he want to play in New England? Because like the thing is, like the Brady discount is gone, dude. Like teams are. This is not a free agent hotspot, so it's like you were gonna have to pay top dollar to get dudes to come play in Foxborough, Massachusetts. This is just reality. So the question is, the Patriots willing to trade him? Like, remember all those Jerry Jeudy rumors, right? Like last year about should the Patriots go get Jerry Jeudy? Jerry Jeudy just went for like a 5th round pick and a 6th round pick. Like the price was even high, and it's like as bad as they need a receiver, like why did they not go make that move? You know what I mean? Like. So
I'll be honest with you. One thing that's always confused me is NFL trades. Like, I mean, you think back to we got Randy Moss for a 4th round pick. This is going way back, but like we got Randy Moss for a 4th round pick. The value of draft picks to me, especially when NBA only has 2 rounds, so it's different. And even now, you're seeing the value of 2nd round picks with the new CBA structure in the NBA, and that's even getting out of whack now as to what is actually the right value. But in the NFL, it's always been wild for me because I think up to a certain point, like sometimes give me the known versus the unknown. Like I love having these 5th, 6th round picks that I can build my team with. But sometimes I'm like, man, if I'm gonna take a 5th or 6th round guy out of Coastal Carolina or Belichick, I love taking rugby guys late. I mean, I know Belichick's not there anymore now, but like we were taking these crazy guys that no one's ever heard of. And it's like sometimes just give me some damn talent that I know what I'm getting and I can build from there.
Right. Yeah, I mean the value throws me too. I mean, like Mac Jones was a 1st round pick 3 years ago. You just traded him for a 6th round pick.
Exactly.
But with the Calvin Ridley stuff, I think the more interesting piece of it is Judon is out here recruiting. So Judon actually like went on Good Morning Football and was like, Calvin Ridley, come on to the Patriots. We got we got everything you need. What sneaker size you need, we'll get you all the colorways. Like, I think Judon's a real fun personality, and he's doing some recruiting. He seems like he cares and wants to get some talent.
Well, I mean, because the defense is legit, right? Like Judon and Gonzalez both go out. I think both they went out. They might have gone out in the same game, that Cowboys game, if I remember correctly, or around the same time. And even without them, the defense held up, and there were stretches where I think I saw there was. I mean, I'll be honest, man. There was some games I couldn't even tune into last year. I was like, I'm not waking up to go watch them play in Germany or whatever. And like I think the defense let up like 20 points over 3 games, but our offense scored I think 10 points or something. Like it was something abysmal like that. And so when you're bringing back that defense and you're expecting your defense to be so good, this is like, this is as we transition from the Belichick to the Mayo era. How does that affect the front office? Are they going to start to spend, or are they going to fall into another local team trap and become the Red Sox and pretend like we live in a small market and not pay anybody? Like this is where it's going to be the biggest difference, I think, for this team. And then back to the original question of whether or not you take a QB at 3 and play him right away. Are you going to spend to give them a chance at success? And I know for the NFL, like their window of build, like if they hit on this number 3 pick, your window starts right now. Like the clock starts as soon as you make that pick at number 3 to get the most value while that quarterback is on a rookie scale deal. Because if he pops by year 4 or 5, whenever they got to give that next contract, now all of a sudden you're back to working a little bit more on the margin. So you got to bring in the talent that you need to now. And I think it's just a complete TBD if this front office is going to do that or not.
Yeah, I think it's really interesting to see how they're going to rebuild this thing, because there's a couple different models that you could look at, like it's like philosophically, do you go get the quarterback first and then build a team, or do you build the team and then go get the quarterback? And there's some interesting, like take San Francisco with Brock Purdy, right? Granted, you're not gonna hit on a 7th round pick every time.
I think we already got our luck hitting on 1 6th round.
Yeah,
it's tough to repeat that twice.
Yeah, but then again, take a quarterback, and that's the most valuable position in football. And I don't think you have a better opportunity to swing big for one than you do this year. I think you got to take a quarterback here at number 3, and then try to get some talent in the later rounds.
Let me ask you this here, Khari. I'll get you out of here with this question. I want you to give me a prediction. The draft's coming up here. Draft's in April, right? Next month, I believe. Yeah. Yes. So draft's coming up next month. So if you were the one to make the call, are you taking a quarterback at 3, or now that we have potentially Baker Mayfield, Russell Wilson, a couple other veteran QBs that are on the market, Ryan Tannehill, a few others, which route would you go? Would you take the young guy, or would you try to go get a veteran? Or maybe let's add a third door. Would you do both? Would you try to grab a Baker Mayfield and also grab a number 3 pick and then sit that 3 pick while you play a guy like Baker? What option would you go, or would you like to see this team go going forward?
I'd like to see him do both. I like competition, and I don't think that Bailey Zappi is necessarily going to be the guy to challenge this next QB when he comes in. But you gotta take the swing now. You need to take a quarterback, and again, this is your best shot at it. You got the 3 pick. You've got 3 dudes who are supposedly franchise changers, and I just think it lines up nicely, right? When you think about it, you've got a new coach, new front office. Why not new quarterback immediately? Then you can set the culture and build it the way it needs to be built. Just complete fresh start, new energy, new life in New England. And that's it. Then you can say, I've got my guy, and we can build the team around him, and hopefully put up some points this year, because it was rough last year.
That was rough, man. Yeah, I hope so too. Build it from the ground up, and hopefully they can start filming Dynasty Part 2. Get 8 more episodes 20 years down the road here for us to watch. But Khari, appreciate you joining me here on this Sunday, man. Boston.com, you're doing Celtics coverage, you're doing Patriots coverage. Anything specific you got coming up that you want to let the people know about?
I'm gonna rank every... Actually, I'm not going to spoil that. I've got some cool stuff lined up, man. Just looking forward to more analysis of the games. Just trying to line up some features, and just keep it coming, man. Keep it coming with the great Celtics content.
That's right, man. Well, we love to see it, man. Appreciate you for stopping by here. That's going to do it for this episode of Green with Envy. We'll be back with more coverage this week. Celtics have a back-to-back Monday, Tuesday, and then another showdown with the Phoenix Suns later in the week. Hopefully, Devin Booker will be back for that one. Would love to see what that matchup looks like. So we'll have you locked in here with Green with Envy. And as always, we're going to play you out with our guy, Greg Manakis, and his band down here in Austin, Texas. This is Black Sheep Optimist. We will see y'all later. Peace.
Every time I get this high, I lose my mind. It don't take much no more until I hit the floor. Every time I get this high, it's you I find. It don't take much no more until I'm at your door.
You cut me to my core, baby. What can I say? You got me on the floor, you know I came to play. I know I shouldn't, but you seem to take my pain away. And every time I score, Jayson Tatum fade away. I close my eyes and I'm floating your river. I call to see if you open, you know I hope you deliver. Every time you're getting close, I still be sick with the shivers. But there's nothing like that first time.